Good afternoon and welcome to the next session of day two of Canto 2023. And the title of this particular session is Keeper of the Word, and it's my absolute great pleasure to welcome Anita Nair. She needs absolutely no introduction, but it's suffices to say that she's definitely one of the most eclectic literary artists to have come out of the subcontinent in recent times. She's the author of various celebrated books, such as The Better Man, The Lady's Coupe, Mistress, Lessons in Forgetting, Idris, Keeper of the Light, which is one of my personal favorites. I thought the book when it came out the airport. Alphabet Soup for Lovers, and Eating Wasps, as well as a crime series where she's invented this detective character of her own. She's the recipient of numerous prizes, including the Crossword Prize and, of course, the very prestigious Sahitya Akademi Award. And she's going to be joined in conversation with Alison James of the University of Chicago. So very warm welcome to you both, and I'm just going to hand it over to Alison.
Thank you, David. Hello, Anita. Is my microphone working?
I can't hear Alison very well.
Does this one? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, the other microphone wasn't working. But it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you, Anita. I just evoked the eclectic quality, nature of your writing. So the fact that you're an author of fiction, including crime fiction, including books for children. You're also an author of plays, screenplays, many other genres. But today, I think we're going to be focusing on your poetry. Let me perhaps start by turning this over to you to read to us from some of your published poetry and also some recent unpublished work.
I think I missed the last part of your.
All right. No, I was just saying that today we're going to be focusing on your work as a poet. We'll start off with you reading from some of your
Yes.
published work and some recent unpublished work. So I'll turn things over to you.
One of the things that I was thinking about yesterday is I was, thinking about what poems to read this afternoon. It just occurred to me that, I began life as wanting to be a poet. Poetry was what made I think my veins sing more than anything else. And at some point, I think, the poetry, I continue to write poetry. Not as much as I used to in my youth, but poetry is still a substantial part of my life. And it's probably that one part of my life, my writing life, which I don't really, make available as I should be, for the reason probably that, one gets caught up in writing novels, and novels somehow tend to kind of reign. The stories are always supreme, and somehow poetry tends to take a backseat in the literary establishment until, of course, the poems begin to resonate with a certain need of the hour of wanting to speak about what is happening.
Wanting to speak about what has happened in your life, or
No, not just my life. It's also it becomes. I think initially when I started writing poetry as a young person, as every young poet, I was so kind of caught up with the beauty of the words and what I could do with the words and everything. But as the years passed, I began to realize that poetry for me was just another way of telling a story, except that with the poetry that I was writing increasingly, it also had an underlying call for action, I would say. I'm not call for action to the rest of the world, but the call for action to myself, basically asking me, I was asking myself questions. And I think it's the same thing that happens when I write my fiction as well. That I write because sometimes I don't understand the world that we inhabit. And to make sense of the world that we inhabit, I need to um, create a world with words. And I think at this point, poetry now is just another form for me of writing, as perhaps a short story is, or an essay is.
So your first, so your collection, you have a collection of poetry called Malabar Mind, which I think was published in 2010. Is that right, with HarperCollins? So would you like to read us some poems from this collection?
Yes. So just to kind of also give you a kind of, growth of trajectory in terms of, or the arc of trajectory in the way that I have written my poems, where I began with just what preoccupied me to taking on another leap and thinking that what preoccupies me and what is happening in the world around me, they come kind of together in the poems I create. So I'm going to start off with a poem that was published in this anthology of mine, which was titled Malabar Mind, and it was first published in 2002. That's 21 years ago, a long time ago. But and this poem that I'm reading out was later picked up by an indie musician, and he turned it into a rock ballad. And so it's available if you go and check on YouTube. And the title of the song, like the title of the poem, is "You Said, I Agreed." Let us be friends, you said. Let us be friends, I agreed. Let there be nothing more, you said. Let there be nothing more, I agreed. I made no declarations, no promises, you said. You made no declarations, no promises. I agreed. It was a minor aberration, a detour, you said. It was a minor aberration, a detour, I agreed. It isn't as if I did anything, you said. It isn't as if anything happened, I agreed. We came out of it with dignity, you said. We came out of it with dignity, I agreed. So this is from the collection, and there's one more poem where I'd like to read from this. Um, this is called "I Want." I want to sit beside you in a rowdy, dingy pub, legs dangling, shoulders jostling, knees touching. I want your breath to drain the sweat off my brow, and for you to lick the bitterness of my lips. I want your eyes to seek mine. I want to hear the hushed lust in your voice amidst the noise. I want to sit beside you in a dark balcony where yesterday's washing doesn't flap its crackling wings. I want us to hear the night call, watch shadows play ball and time creep up a celestial wall. I want your fingers to unerringly seek mine. I want to exist as more than a mere habit. And then, of course, over the last few years, the kind of poetry that I have been writing um, is just as intense, I'd like to think, but there's also a subtle element of humor that started popping into my poems. And I'd like to read from that. Okay. So the first one I'm going to read is called Why? Why climb every mountain? Why sail every sea? Why explore every continent? Why open every tomb? Why dig up every lost city? Why dredge every wreck? Why decipher every hieroglyphic? Why deconstruct every plume of imagination? Why examine every emotion? Why thread every bead? Why pluck every weed? Why name every form of life? Why explain every phenomenon? Why count every penny? Why stretch every moment? Why trap every dream? And and then I wrote this poem. I wrote it on a whim. And then I remember sending it out to a lot of my female friends, and all of us had a good laugh about it. And it's called How Men Eat. I watch men eat, the opening of the mouth, the curling of the tongue, the pouching of the cheek. I watch how they slice and spear, how they chew and swallow. I watch how men forget to pretend with food on their plate. All I need to know about a man, I find as he eats. Watch the man who picks at his food as if it were ridden with hundreds and thousands of rapacious weevils, each seeking to chew into him, daubing and probing. He litters the rim with suspicion. This is one you could befriend, but must never love, for fear holds him back. In life, there is none more important than him. The man there who shovels in with gusto and relish. Each mouthful of what you lay before him, life to him is a marrow bone to suck and suck till dark flesh slides down his throat. Keep him only for a while, for even as he glows with all he devours, soon he will pick every shred of your life and thought, licking you clean of your very being. Now, of this one be wary. He eats as if to eat is an act of faith, yet the plate is wiped clean. Now watch as he trashes the cook. Sorry. Now watch as he trashes the cook, the cauldron, and the stove. Malcontent and miserable, the food is ashes in his belly. Everything to him is an affront, a failure to measure up. And so will you eventually. There is the careful eater, taking only as much as he knows is possible, nibbling, savoring, never rushing, the deliberate boy who arranges his plate as if it were his tomorrow. Everything in its place. Marry him to your daughter, for he will love as he eats, carefully. But for yourself, is that what you want? Often I would wonder if there would ever be one in whom lives a hunger to know food is more than food. So each meal is for him, as it is to me, the last meal on earth, to savor and relish. Would there be one with an insatiable appetite for love, for life, for more than what we can see? Wait, I see a man there, whose hand seeks his mouth with no thought, no joy. Just another thing to do. What monsters lurk within, what bleakness blear the edges. Then I see him reach for a plump purple fig. I see the mask of indifference split. I see the hunger for the sap, the flesh, the yearning to feast on all there is. What makes him hide? His hunger for what could be his. Is it food he fears, or is it what love could be? I see then the furtive, greedy grasp, the northern lights of desire, the fig set ablaze in him. I could teach him to eat as to love, I think. He will teach me to see, I think. He will teach me to be, I think. Would you like me to finish off with one last poem?
Yes,
Or
I think so.
do you want to take a break?
We can talk, I was just going to say that I love the fig that splits that breaks down the resistance of that the last poem. So,
Yeah.
but yes, we have time for some more poems. If you'd like to read.
I'm going to be reading this poem. So this is drawn from the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, there is a very shameful and distasteful episode where Draupadi, who is married to the Pandavas, is forfeited in a game of dice, and the husband, the she has five husbands, and the first one, Yudhishthira, he plays a game of dice and he gambles away everything. He gambles away his uh, kingdom and his horses and his treasure house and everything. Then he gambles away his brothers, and finally all that he's left with is his wife, and he gambles her away as well. And then once she's been lost in the game of dice, the cousins with whom he has been playing this game of dice say that she is now their slave, and that she must be brought to the palace where the game of dice was happening. And they decide that since she is a slave girl now, and everything that she has on her, including her clothes, are hers, I mean, are theirs, and hence they decide to disrobe her in public. And to me, this is probably one of the most horrific and shameful episodes from the Mahabharata. And I just wrote a poem about this. This was written some years ago for the Kochi Biennale, where there was a Norwegian sculptor artist, and she had done an installation, and I had written this poem to kind of juxtapose with that piece of art that she had created. The title of this poem is "In Which a Small Gesture Becomes Epic." I have a husband, actually, I have five. It so happened that one of them strung a bow and shot a fish swimming on a tree through its eye. He didn't look at all except in a pool that shimmered. They took me home, a hovel for a princess. I said nothing, for love is like that. It makes idiots of us women, and I was just a girl. Tall, strong, seeds brimming their sacks, but such mothers' boys, through and through. She had trained them well to heed and never proceed until she said so, bloody cow. She sat within their mother. What secret thoughts, what hidden truths, what furrowed her brow? Divided between all of you, she said, as if I were an effing hen. Wings for one, breast for another, legs for one, neck for the other, and a wishbone to tug on. I have a husband, actually five, but all of this you already know. But now that I am to be stripped bare, let me tell you about them and men, for you can't not understand men a little when you've had five to handle. No, don't glare at me, you bloody cow. This is some of your doing. You brought up good sons, but not necessarily good men. As for you, Dushasana, you mega moron, let me save you the trouble. Let me peel away these layers on my own. This one is Yudhishthira, the wise one, son of Dharma, untainted, uncorrupt, forever right, the gentle tyrant rapping my knuckles. Draupadi, this doesn't befit you. A father teaching me how to be. You look away now, you coward. You do not want to get involved. Righteousness made you smug. Righteousness makes you effing selfish. I still have four husbands. Which one of you will be there for me? Bhima, son of Vayu, the wolf-bellied wielder of the mace, you were the bumbling brother, seeking to protect me from bee and behemoth, yearning to fulfill my whimsies. I see you wanting to rush to me. I see Dharma lay his hand on your knee. I see you, second husband, fall back. Arjuna, my Arjuna, son of Indra, my god among men, lover who feasted on my lips, you were the nectar I would never tire of. You won my hand, and now you forsake me with equal effortless ease. So I am now left with two husbands. Nakula, my radiant dark husband, more handsome than any man living, Hoarse whisperer, tender lover, the younger man who made me laugh. In you I saw the bloom of a toy boy, all muscles, testosterone, and charm. But where are you now, Nakula? Or your twin Sahadeva, the all knowing but bashful one? So much a child who needed me to show him how to be a man. When you ate your father's flesh, you knew, and yet you allowed this to happen. That I cannot forgive, Sahadeva. So here I stand, shorn of husbands and all that I was. My name is Yagnaseni. I was born of fire. Your scorching gaze doesn't shame me. With the blue lotus, my fragrance is freedom. You can smell a yojana away. I am Krishna's Saki, but even that epithet I forsake, for I cannot be what you want me to be anymore. I open my hair, so you know. I erase the marks, so you know that I'm a woman first, a woman true, and everything only thereafter. So, this was the beginning of how I started writing political poems.
And political poems that often deal with gender as well, but in different modes. Actually, that's what struck me. That you have um, just now this taking up this episode from the Mahabharata, or else in a more humorous mode in How Men Eat, for example, or in the poem you read earlier. You said I agreed. There, I guess the gender isn't specified, but I think there again you have this kind of gap that opens up in communication, presumably within a couple, and so I think this is interesting. So would you characterize all of this poetry as political, or um, does it vary? Is some of it more lighthearted? How do you see it?
I mean, every piece of poem is now political while it's personal. But I think, in the beginning, when I started writing, like I mentioned earlier, my preoccupation with was trying to understand myself and my thoughts and, where I fitted in within the world of, the world that I inhabit, as well as, the world of my imagination. But over the years, I find that every time um, something happens, and this could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, it could be an accident, it could be a catastrophe, it could be anything, but it could be something that moves me so much that I find that I'm no longer able to write only about whatever I want to write about from a personal point of view. It also becomes something where I, without being really conscious of it, there is a political, a political, I would say, belligerence almost creeping in into it. And so I might be talking about eating, but it's again a political act for me, because it becomes a definition of who we are and what we are in this world we live in.
I was just thinking of the title of your poetry collection, the Malabar Mind, which is also which is the title of one of the poems that talks about Malabar, and you have a note talking about Malabar as a state of mind. So there again, there's a political kind of background and a reflection on what Malabar means, a reflection on history that's kind of behind the poem. So it seems to be that political aspect is there in the earlier poetry as well.
Yes. So even with Malabar Mind, so the thing, of course, is that Malabar existed as a principality that was part of the Madras presidency during the British times. And much later, when the states were formed and Kerala became an amalgam of three princely states, the Travancore, Cochin, and the Malabar region. And so on a map, you would not find a place called Malabar. There isn't a longitude or latitude that would define it anymore. But Malabar, when I wrote this poem, and I don't think much has changed even to this day. Malabar is really like a state of mind. It's a state of mind where you are a certain kind of person. If you are from the region of Malabar, you're laid back. You tend to be a little. It's like the way the Chinese would, distinguish between the southern Chinese and the northern Chinese, or you would take like a big country and say that okay, the people in this region are so different in the way they approach life, the way they look at life, their work ethic, their standard of expectations. All of that is very different. So Malabar, to me and to a lot of people from Kerala, is a state of mind where you kind of laid back, and there is a lushness there, there's a fecundity there, all of it exists, but there's also a kind of deep rooted malaise, which is basically like a kind of dissatisfaction with life. And I'd actually like to read that poem, The Malabar Mind, the title poem. In his eyes, the lunatic gleam. Tata Madras, Tata fiends of hell. Keep your lady politicians and deceased flies. The Malabar male wheezes and chuckles. Look at this girl, the lunatic stares. Her curves are ripe melons. Pardon me, I know not what I think. May I touch your feet, please? My madness will vanish with the soft breeze. Let me go, I'm not mad, only deprived. Why did I leave the emerald cave? The river Nila, sandbanks rising yellow and gritty, once flourished triangular hate, the cow worshippers, the pig haters, and the sunshine haired cow eaters. No one knows how it came about. 1,000 men piled into a carriage, trundled and truckled, gasping for life. When they opened the doors, the stench they say made people gag a mile away. In Malabar, they cannot forget sometimes the soft breeze smells of blood. The Zamorin saw his face on a piece of glass, opened doors to colonial greed. We have so much pepper, so many spices. Give it to them for mirrors. Should man live a stranger to his face? Our men now sail the seas across the bay to the desert hope. In the backwaters, women sail lonely rafts, spinning coir, weaving dreams. Zubaida, creature of the grimy hovel, queen now of a green mansion. Fish juices trickle down her chin every day. Is there more to life? She asks. Geeta has her husband's voice on tape. The children listen to it now and then. Venu, distant cousin, loves her on Wednesdays and Fridays, satiating lust and a need to be held. He caresses her skin. She licks his eyes and wills him to take her in rhythmic ecstasy. It is only till he comes back home, she tells God. Malabar, Manibar, Mulibar, Munibar, Malibar, Melibar, Minibar, Milibar, Minubar, Malabaria, Malabaria, where the rain hisses, echoes of 1,000 footsteps, each seeking to measure the girth of wetness. Eaves drip countless forsaken thoughts, tiles splay revealing parted rafter thighs. Politics is a way of life, belong to a party for an identity, the Congress or the RSS, the Muslim League or the Communists. There is still about life here a quiet air of restfulness. Naidi knee deep in slush, tractors and buffaloes his companions. Together they watch time amble by. How can man be content when he knows his rights? Militants dress in schoolteacher guises. The forest hides disenchanted hearts. Madness threatens to erupt at any time. Lying in the limpid green pool, mouth open to catch the first dewdrop. Grandfather's concubine died yesterday. Who will light his lantern at night, I wonder? Father came back from roaming the plains, built a home, and settled his books. Mother likes to think of nothing. The emerald cave has a soothing clutch. The devil bird weeps, pua, pua. I kiss my elephant hair talisman. Coconut palms rustle their fingers. Courage and the soft breeze will cure madness, they say. So this was trying to capture what Malabar was. Yeah.
But it also seems to be a poem about history,
Mhm.
empire, and all, yeah, various different things. I was wondering, is the story, is the part with the thousand men in a carriage, is that a historical moment?
Yes, so that's actually a story where, there were in 1921 in Kerala, in Turkey, there was a Khilafat movement that took place. There was a revolt there, and it kind of percolated down into Kerala, and the Khilafat movement had started taking place also in Kerala. Now, the 1921 episode of Kerala history is not so very well known outside Kerala itself. But this was a time when, but if you were to speak to people in Malabar, especially, almost every family has a story to tell of how I think, things had come to a head where the British were unable to kind of stem the revolt that was happening. The the Dalit community who had been treated so badly by the Savarna community in Kerala um, chose to convert to Islam, and together they many of them rose up in revolt because it was basically a very landed community, and the caste system was so ghastly there that I mean, pretty people lived within like cages of caste. There was no way you could escape it, and there was no way of ever making your life better in any way because caste determined everything about you: how you dressed, what you wore, how you tied your hair, what jewelry you could wear, all of it, what foods you ate, which temples you could go to, or which places of worship you could go to, all of it. So Islam came as a relief to a lot of the Dalit and the backward communities because it gave them an opportunity to be equal. And during that time, there was a lot of rebellion. The poor workers, the working class, they revolted against the landlords. Um, and one of the ways that the British thought that they could contain this was the first railway lines had just started running in Kerala at that time. So they put men who had never seen a railway line or a railway platform ever in their life. They were put into a carriage, into a goods carriage, and the door was closed. And they ran the train for about just a distance of about 35 kilometers, but then it's 1921, so it took a long time. They ran this train up and down, this coach up and down, and they finally opened it like 3 days later, and people had died there of fright, of suffocation, of hunger, of thirst, of emotional exhaustion. And they opened it, and every passenger inside, I mean, they were not passengers, they were like cattle and shoved in. All of them were dead. Um, so it's again a ghastly piece of history that, for some strange reason, that hasn't really kind of. I mean, in Kerala history books, they talk about it. There have been films that have been made about it, but it doesn't go beyond Kerala. Not many people know about it. So what I tried to do was kind of weave in those episodes, like trace the history of Malabar in that poem.
Yes, or bringing its history into the present in a way, because this is put on the same level in the poem. Yes, it's still something that is still very present in the breeze. Um, Thank you. Yeah, I maybe wanted to come back to a question you touched on a little bit, but that is the role of poetry, or how poetry relates to your other writings. You said that it's all part of the creation of a world. in a way, or just another way of telling stories. But is there something you can do in poetry that you feel you can't do in your fiction?
No, it's like okay. For instance, so when what happens is with when I'm writing a story, I find that the nature of my own, I think, personality is that when I like to kind of dwell on details, and I like to talk about everything, every aspect of it. But I find with poetry that I remove all those things and I just go straight for the emotion and nothing else. So while emotion is always seen, I mean, it's not being melodramatic, but I find that emotion allows me to kind of speak to when I write my poetry. It's like I'm reading out my poetry for someone who's sitting opposite me and listening to what I'm reading out to them. So for me, poetry is a form of conversation, is a form of dialogue. Not dialogue as much as a monologue with somebody who's there and who's interested in hearing what I have to say about a specific thing. With fiction, I find that that I'm creating worlds. I'm creating worlds that are not probably familiar to me as well. I mean, these are worlds that I need to research, I need to understand, and I need to delve into to be able to write about it. So it takes me, it's a long process that I go through. But with poetry, I find that I never actually work on a poem over a period of time. I write it in it's like usually a poem's written in one shot. I and then later go back, of course, and work on the crafting and everything. But the first line to the last line is written. It's almost like catharsis for me. I need to write it to be able to uh, stifle the words that are kind of threatening to erupt out of me. So I need to write it, and it's written in one stretch, and that's it. That doesn't matter. And I don't need like a working surface, or I don't need anything. I would even write a poem on a napkin, or I might write uh, on a dinner napkin, or I could write it on the back of a cigarette packet, or anything. It doesn't matter to me. Whereas when I write my prose, I find that it's a deliberate act for me. It's a more deliberate act that I need to be able to use the right kind of paper. I need to have my fountain pen, all of that. But I need none of those extraneous things when I write poetry. It just comes straight within. And I don't know, when I finish writing a poem, I look at it and then I ask myself, where did this come from? Whereas when I look at my prose, I know exactly where it came from.
The prose is more of a project, or it's a longer term kind of construction that happens. Is it? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I say so. So the prose would be more of a project where you're of creating something for a
Yes, yes.
longer term.
In fact, every few months, I tell myself, yes, I need to put together all my poetry, the ones that I've been writing since Malabar Mind was published, and I keep thinking I have more to add to it, and then the time just passes.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it seems that there's a different writing process, and then there's also a different relationship to the reader, or you're imagining a more direct form of address to the reader. That seems to be the case.
No, again, Alison, there's some kind of distortion.
I was really just summarizing what you said, but it seems that there's a different process, and then there's a different relationship to the reader as well, or a different way of addressing the reader more directly.
Yeah, I think also that I mean, obviously, as one grows older, there is a certain reining in of emotion, which happens. But I find that when I write my poetry now, that while there is that reining in, it's still as if I haven't lost any of my wide-eyed way of looking at the world. So I think that one part of me, that there's a part of me that remains untouched by time, and that part of me is what emerges when I, write my poetry, because it's not as if I would sit down and analyze why I'm writing what I'm writing. And even when, and I mean, when we had the farmers, movement happening, I again had written this poem, and which was read out by a well-known film star who's also a very political person. And I found that, if the first time that I was able to use poetry as a way of communicating um, what these farmers were feeling, probably in English. Now, there's a lot of poetry probably being written in Hindi and in Punjabi and in Tamil and, all the Indian languages, because that's where the the farmers are from. I mean, that's the language that they use. There isn't enough, I thought, being written about in English. And the reason is that, obviously, again, there is this huge divide that you see in India even today, um, that English tends to be the language used by the very educated, the people who are of a different socio-economic background. And English, and there many of them live, I think, in this almost a bubble where things like farmers' protests, etc., doesn't exist. It's not part of their everyday life. It's not part of their daily reckoning in any way. And though I write in English, and that is just probably an accident of birth more than anything else. um, that I'm very rooted in the rural world. My family are agrarian people, and or were agrarian people, and I still have very strong ties to the village that my family comes from. I'm there, I spend a lot of time there. So I understand the rural landscape probably much more than I understand the urban landscape. And so for me, the poem that I was writing, that I felt that I needed to be part of the farmers' protests, was the only way that I could do it was by writing a poem that would echo what was going on in the minds of these millions of farmers who were protesting.
I also I was wondering actually about the relationship between your writing and some of your political activism. I know you're a supporter of the UN Refugee Council. Is that right? So you've done work for refugees. So I was just wondering about the relationship between activism and poetry for you. We've talked a little bit about the political.
So I think, like, if you look at the tradition of poetry itself, like, at a point long before the novels and stories were something that people could pick up and read, the bards were the voices, and the bards carried the poems from one place to another. And we've had that in every culture. The wandering minstrels have been there in every culture, and they were the speakers of the truth, and like the court jester who had immunity, and he could state what was being said as long as it was said as a joke. They were, I think, the foremost political commentators at that point of time. They were the only ones who could do it, and so much of the thoughts that was happening. I mean, the thinking of that time was, I think, echoed in the songs that were written around that time, the songs that were sung. And in every community, again, you would see that the call for revolt, the call for rebellion, all of that came via poetry. To this day, that if you were to see a procession taking place, it doesn't matter which part of the world, and when people are called, walking with placards, you would see that there's a certain resonance, there's a cadence to the way words are put together, way words are um, thrown at whatever they're throwing it at, whether it's establishment or the university or whatever it is, the political parties and so on. So I think what happens is that the voice, the power of the voice, especially when it's able to weave in emotion without making it a chest beating exercise, has an amazing ability to evoke sentiments in people. And I think poetry in a long time has lost that place. Like for instance, if one were to be reading the poetry of Ginsberg, Allen Ginsberg, and so on, you would think that you see that there is a deep sense of dissatisfaction, and there is a call for some form of change. It's not call for action as much as call for change. And increasingly, I find that as our lives have become that much more comfortable, the political spine of poetry seems to have kind of receded further and further. And it's all become very much about I, me, myself, which is the nature of the world that we live in today, where, people are, there's so much time spent on navel gazing in different forms. And it's all about who I am, what am I, and stuff like that. Now, for me, that was who I was when I was a younger person, and I think every younger person should go through that, period of trying to understand who they are. But as an older poet, I can no longer allow myself to write self-indulgent poetry. I need to use my poetry in a way that it serves a purpose. It's the same with the fiction that I write. It's no longer the fiction that I could have written when I was in my 20s and in my early 30s. Now, in my 50s, I find that there is a greater urgency in me to be able to write things that matter, things that are going to, and this is not about trying to be immortal, but it's basically about trying to give voice to all the things that I need to be able to say, because perhaps somebody else might not say it. And it's my responsibility to be able, because I've always believed that a writer's um, apart from creating beautiful worlds and complex worlds and all of that, and laying bare who we are as people to ourselves, the writer also has a responsibility to leave a residual message with the reader in some form or the other. I'm not saying that I think a writer can change the world, but I think the writer can help provoke thought. And it's now important to me that no matter whether I'm writing prose or I'm writing poetry, that I be able to leave behind a residual thought in the reader or listener's mind.
If not, I think that's a good place to end the conversation with this reflection on the role of poetry, the responsibility of writers. We need to promote thought about the present. So thank you very much, Anita, for this, for the reading, for this reflection in your writing, and it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Alison.